Hi friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So a while back, in connection with my 1500 subscriber celebration, I had solicited a bunch of questions so that I could do some Q&A videos. So I got a ton of really fun, great questions. So thank you all so much who sent in questions, and I'm gonna go ahead and answer some of them. So I'm probably gonna break this into several videos. I don't know quite how many yet, but I am going to start with answering some questions related to tarot and witchy topics, and then also do some separate videos related to all of the other life topics that people ask me about. So hopefully this will be fun and I'm excited. So let's get started. So one of the questions that I got was, what's the element that you feel most connected with? So out of earth, air, fire, and water, what do you feel most connected with? So the element that I feel most connected with is water. My birth chart is so full of water. I have so many water signs in my chart. Oh my God. I'm like a Pisces sun, Scorpio rising, Cancer, Mars, Mercury and Venus are both also in Pisces. Like it's so many. There is water everywhere, all over my chart. So I obviously feel very connected to water. I also though tend to be very drawn to earth and earthy things. And it's interesting because earth is the element that is basically not represented at all in my chart, and yet I tend to feel really drawn to it, which I sort of feel like maybe is a sort of balance kind of thing. You know, maybe I feel drawn to earthy things because I sort of lack that earthy element in terms of my chart and you know, aspects of my personality and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure, but in any case, I'd say water definitely, but I also often feel very drawn to earth and earthy things. So another question that I got, and again, this relates to my birth chart. So do you feel that your birth chart represents you well, or that particular parts of it really say something about you? So for the most part, yes. I am again, Pisces sun, Libra moon, Scorpio rising. And yeah, I do tend to think that those things represent me very well. I'd say the Pisces sun for sure. I am a very, very emotional person and tend to be hopefully a pretty intuitive person. You know, I'd say hopefully I have a fair number of those Pisces characteristics, but having that air component in my chart as well is definitely something that resonates with me. I've always tended to be a relatively sort of studious and cerebral kind of person, and so there is that side to my personality as well, for sure. So yeah, I'd say that my birth chart represents me pretty well. So I also got asked my Myers-Briggs type, my Hogwarts House, and my Enneagram type. And I only know the first two of those. I don't know what my Enneagram type is. I've never taken a test for that or anything. But Myers-Briggs type is INFJ, and my Hogwarts House is definitely Ravenclaw, although I would say again, in connection with my whole being drawn to earth thing, I do have some very strong Hufflepuff tendencies as well. So now for some questions about YouTube. I am grouping YouTube questions in with the whole witchy tarot side because that is mostly what my YouTube channel is about. So I'm including those here. So I got a question of, how did my YouTube's channel name come into being? So again, you know, my channel name is Sunset Bow Tarot, and it is kind of a weird name, I know. And it is actually loosely based on a literal translation of my surname. So, which I'm not going to say what it is, but let's just say that if you kind of loosely translated my surname into English, it would suggest Sunset Bow in certain ways. So that's where it came from. It came from my last name. So, you know, and when I was coming up with a YouTube channel name, I was just sort of like, I'll call it that, I don't know. And yeah, now here I am several years later with the same weird name, and nobody knows how to pronounce bow ever, and yeah, whatever. That's where we are. I'm probably never gonna change it. So the next question, again YouTube related, is what made you decide to start a YouTube channel? And quite frankly, I just wanted to talk about decks. I remember I would watch deck walkthrough videos, and people would talk about their insights about the cards and like what symbolism they saw, and I remember thinking, I could do that. I have all those thoughts when I look at a deck. You know, I could talk through what I see in the cards. And so, you know, my first couple of videos that I did tended to be more along this sort of like in-depth walkthrough of a deck kind of vein, which, you know, it isn't something that I do as much, like it's not 100% of my channel anymore doing those kinds of things, but that was really the thing that most spurred me to get started, was that I really just wanted to be able to talk about what I saw in tarot cards and, you know, really think through out loud what I was seeing and share those insights with people. So that is really why I started my channel. And obviously since then it's really grown to encompass a lot of other things, and you know, has been a cool outlet as far as meeting lots of other people in the community, and that aspect of it I have really enjoyed. So another question I got about YouTube is, do you get nervous when filming? Yes, I get extremely nervous when filming. I wish I could like reveal to you guys exactly how much editing goes into the videos that I make. Maybe you watch them and think these don't seem edited at all because she's still just rambling and stumbling over her words and saying things that don't make sense. But in reality, there's an awful lot of editing that goes into this, because I do actually feel wildly uncomfortable on camera most of the time. I never ever thought that I was going to be the kind of person who had a YouTube channel where I actually videoed myself talking and then put it out there in the world for anybody to see. I hate having my picture taken. I hate being in videos. I don't like that stuff in normal life. And so this whole YouTube thing is actually, it's probably been good for me in a way, but it's like very antithetical to my personality and very outside of my comfort zone. So I get extremely nervous when filming. So yeah, now you know the dirty secret. I also got the question, are you more public or private about tarot and spirituality out in, you know, the real world or in real life? And I say it's sort of a mix. In terms of family and friends, most of them know that I read tarot. I've probably read tarot for the vast majority of them at one point or another. It is something that people know that I do and am interested in. I am very private about my social media with people that are part of my life in terms of my family and friends. Most of them don't know, either don't know that I have a social media presence in terms of a YouTube channel, etc. Or if they do know, they don't know what it is. So I do tend to keep that aspect of it a bit private, just because, I don't know, again, I tend to feel pretty uncomfortable on camera and, you know, talking on YouTube and doing all those kinds of things. And it's just somehow really high stakes feeling to have, you know, people who are close to you in terms of like old friends or family, you know, be aware of that kind of stuff. Like, I still have a pretty strong kind of fear of being judged for those kinds of things. So so just out of comfort, I do keep those kind of things a little bit more private. I've recently started to get a little bit more chill about, you know, some of that social media stuff. And it kind of all started, a friend of mine who knew that I read tarot but didn't know, you know, like the extent of my social media presence or anything, all of a sudden one day followed my tarot Instagram channel, which obviously links out to my Facebook business page and to this YouTube channel and to my website and to all of the other things. And I lost my shit and totally freaked out. And then, you know, like I've had to sort of like dial it back a bit and try to chill out a little bit about the fact that people might find me, because Facebook is the worst. And if you have Instagram and Facebook, people who are your Facebook friends are probably going to find whatever random Instagram, no matter how much you think you kept them separate, you probably didn't. So such is life. I also got the question around how many decks do you have in your library? And then I think somebody else asked how many tarot and how many oracle decks I have. The number really fluctuates. I have kind of a constant steady inflow and outflow of decks in my collection. It's really kind of fluid that way. I don't tend to hold on to decks if they aren't working out for me, or even if a deck is one that I've really loved in the past, if I haven't been using it, I'll usually let it go. So my collection kind of tends to hover in a little bit of a, you know, sort of general level, I'd say. And I'd say it generally hovers around 100 decks. And I'd say the breakdown there is maybe about 75 tarot decks and 25 oracle decks. I read tarot a lot more than oracle. And any bigger than that, it starts to get really overwhelming to me. So that's a number that feels good to me. Like I said, around about 100 total decks. Sometimes it's a little bit less. Usually it doesn't get to be much more at all, and if it ever does, it goes down pretty quickly again. But as you've probably seen on this channel, I do declutter my collection pretty regularly, and if I bring a deck in and then it turns out to be one that I'm not connecting with, I will usually let it go without too much fuss. So yeah, so it kind of hovers at a sort of level right around 100. So I also got asked if there are any decks on my wish list, and yes, there are a few. So one of them is the Playful Heart Tarot. I don't know why I passed this one up when it was originally, I think it was a Kickstarter, and then she had other ones that she was selling, and somehow I kept thinking, oh, that's not for me, that's not for me, that's not for me, and then somehow I suddenly became extremely interested in it right around the time that she didn't have any more to sell. And I think she's doing another printing of them, and I'm like on the, signed up on the list to find out when that happens and everything. So I am really interested in the Playful Heart Tarot. I'm excited about the new Baroque Bohemian Cats that Baba Studio is doing. And then I sort of have my normal unicorns that I would love to get at some point. So that would be like the Tarot of Delphi, the Idiosyncra, and lately I've been really drawn to the Delta Enduring, but again, it's probably one that I'm never going to get my hands on, but if ever that opportunity came along, I'd be very excited. So I also got asked if there are any decks that I have been having trouble connecting with. And yeah, actually, I recently brought into my collection right around the same time. I brought in, I don't know, I was in like kind of an abstract sort of mood as far as tarot, and I had seen I think it's called the K Tarot Love. And I think I saw that on Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot's channel. And I thought that was really cool. And then around the same time, I also brought in the Margaret Peterson, which is a mass market deck, but they sort of both have a similar kind of abstract vibe. And as between the two of them, I think I like the Margaret Peterson a little better, but they feel like they would fill the same kind of niche in my collection potentially. So I think I am going to let the K Tarot Love go. The Margaret Peterson, I'm still on the fence about, but I need to work with it more, quite frankly. So I also got asked, how do you decide to let decks go, and how do you let them go? Sort of the mechanics of how I get rid of decks. So it's actually pretty easy for me to decide to let decks go. I tend to be very weirdly unsentimental about tarot decks, despite being extremely sentimental about things elsewhere in my life. But I find that if I am not working with a deck, it tends to be very easy for me to say goodbye to it. Even if it's something that's like rare or expensive or, anything like that. I usually, once I figure out that a deck isn't working for me, I'm pretty much ready to just be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna let you go to somebody else who will enjoy you more. So yeah, really, if I notice that I haven't been using a deck or reaching for it or feeling drawn to it, that is when I will sort of start putting it on the list of decks that I'm considering rehoming. And I just sort of keep a list in Evernote, actually, of decks that I'm considering rehoming. And sometimes decks come back off that list, sometimes they go back on. But ultimately, when I get to a point that I have a pretty stable list of decks where it hasn't really changed in a while, and there are a number of decks that have been on there for a while that I know I'm probably going to let go, then I'll go ahead and usually film like a declutter video. And yeah, I tend to actually, at least these days, if I post a declutter video, I'll be able to sell most of the decks just via my channel. People contact me and I'll send them a PayPal invoice and ship them the deck. But I'm also lucky enough to live in the United States, and most of the people who watch my channel also live in the United States, so it's easy for me to ship decks to people. I feel like if I lived overseas or in a place where there just weren't as many people who are interested in purchasing decks, it would be a lot more difficult just because of the sheer postage of all of it. It gets really difficult to ship things internationally at any kind of reasonable rate, but at least within the US, and especially for small things like decks, it's pretty easy to ship things and have it, not cost too much. So I got a couple of questions about the concept of like my perfect tarot deck. Like if I were to create my own perfect tarot deck, what would it be? Or have I already found the perfect deck, and thus do I not feel like I would need to create the perfect deck? And then somebody else asked if you were to design your own deck, like what theme or emphasis would it have? And so I did actually recently design my own deck. um, in collaboration with a couple of friends, and it turns out that it's BTS based. BTS, again, being the South Korean boy band, who are absolutely wonderful, and if you have not checked them out, they're incredible, and I cannot recommend them more highly. But yeah, so I did recently create a deck that I absolutely love, but in that case, you know, it's very much based on the subject matter being appealing to me, being a, you know, member of ARMY. Obviously, I love the BTS tarot deck that we created. You know, I don't know that there is such a thing as a perfect deck, even if I did design it myself, but there are decks that I would like to see in the world. So I used to say that I really wanted to find the perfect cat deck, and I actually did, you know, in the last year, find a cat deck that I really, really love. So I'm not really so much on the hunt for a cat deck anymore, but another type of deck that I would really love to see, I think that there is a real shortage of decks on the market that are based on sort of impressionist or post-impressionist artwork. I know that there is the Impressionist Tarot. I've never been a huge fan of that one, but I really would love to see like a cat black style collage deck where artworks are collaged into a single you know, tarot card, but based on impressionist and post-impressionist art. So I would really love to see that. That would be a cool thing if somebody created that. I do not have the skills to do it myself. So I got asked, what was your first encounter with the tarot and how old were you? And I honestly don't know. I don't remember a time when I wasn't at least aware that tarot existed. I do have very strong memories because I was a huge Simpsons fan growing up, and the episode of The Simpsons that, you know, we are all familiar with, that the whole concept of the happy squirrel card came from, has always been one of my favorite Simpsons episodes. And so I do remember like seeing that episode many times before I actually became interested in reading tarot. So that was probably a big like pop cultural sort of moment for tarot for me. But yeah, I don't actually know. Like, I don't remember what would have been my first experience with it or my first sort of awareness of it existing. So I also got the question of what brought you to tarot? And I honestly don't remember. Like, this is a question that I've thought about many, many times because when I started reading tarot, it was right around 2003 into 2004 was when I really started first getting into it. And that was right around like the end of law school for me. And I honestly don't recall what initially sparked my interest. You know, I had been interested in sort of like witchy things for several years, you know, toward the end of college, like in the late 90s, I'd gotten interested in reading some witchy books and things like that. So I'm sure that I was at least aware of divination and specifically tarot as a practice that was often part of a, you know, sort of witchy practice. But somehow I didn't actually get interested in it until several years later. So I don't remember what initially sparked me to say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna like get myself a tarot deck. I like honestly don't recall. I do know that that was right around the time I had been in a really sort of long-term relationship during college and the early part of law school. And I had just like that relationship had just ended and I had moved out on my own. And that was right around the time that I started getting interested in tarot. So I don't know if maybe it was just a sort of like, you know, feeling a little bit freer to sort of be myself kind of thing and thinking, okay, this is something that I've been reading about now for all of these years and maybe I should actually like give it a whirl and see how it goes. You know, that's sort of maybe the thing that I can think of that was going on in my life at the time, but I honestly don't remember what first made me think, yes, I'm gonna buy myself a tarot deck. If you had to name one deck as the deck that you can't live without, what would it be? This is a really hard question for me to answer because I like reading tarot for myself, but I also like reading tarot for other people. And I almost never the twain shall meet in terms of which decks I use to read for myself and which ones I use to read for other people. But in terms of the deck that I couldn't live without in terms of reading for myself, it would be the Touchstone Tarot, which is my beloved soul deck that I love so much. That would be like the one deck. If I had to get rid of my entire collection, and could only keep one deck, that is the one I would keep. As far as a deck that I couldn't let go of to read for other people, that's a really tough one. I might actually go with a textured tarot. I use that one a lot to read for other people. But again, maybe I'm only allowed one, in which case I guess I would say I would never read for other people again, and I would just keep the touchstone for myself. I can't read for other people with that deck though. Like it just, I can't share it. It's just a really personal relationship. So I don't know. Anyway, that's a really tough question to answer. I did get a question of whether or not I have any book recommendations for a newbie to the rune world, because at the time I was doing a giveaway of a set of runes right when I did this Q&A call, and so I think runes were on the mind for everybody. And quite frankly, I also consider myself a complete newbie to the rune world. So the thing that I would recommend, because the thing that I have found most useful, is the Rune Spiral cards by Nina from Shuffle Tarot. She has this set of cards that she sells on Make Playing Cards, and they're called Rune Spiral cards, and they basically are a picture of the rune with some illustration that kind of suggests the meaning of the rune, and then she also has a guidebook to go with it. And quite honestly, I have learned the most about runes from those, so I highly recommend those. So I also got the question of favorite tarot books. In terms of the books that I always recommend to people, like if a beginner comes to me and says, what books would you recommend? There are two books that I always recommend. One of them is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sonova. I read that when I wasn't a beginner anymore, but I still absolutely loved it. I think it's a super good read and has a lot of great information, not just about card meanings, but also about all of the other aspects of being a tarot reader. There's some stuff about ethics. There's some stuff about like how to structure a reading. I mean, it's just a really, really good and useful book. So when people come to me and say, I'm interested in learning tarot, I'm like, okay, buy that book first. I also have always really loved, and I think it's really underrated, Learning the Tarot by Joan Bunning, which is also available. The complete content of it is available on a website, which is learntarot.com, which is a super old looking website, but it has great information still, and it has the same info as the book, and it's really, really good. But I actually had that book when I first started reading tarot, and again, this is back in like 2003, and it's a really, really good book. It has tons of examples of different keywords and key phrases to go along with all of the cards. It gives you lots of different ways of thinking about the cards in terms of what they could mean. And I just think it's a great book for a beginner in terms of like a reference to have on your shelf for if you do a reading and you're kind of stuck in terms of, what you're coming up with for what the card meanings are. It gives you just a wealth of different ways of looking at and thinking about the cards. So I really, really like that one. In terms of a recent book that really kind of changed the way that I view tarot and really contributed a lot to my understanding, I'd have to say Tarot on Earth by Tom Benjamin. That book gave me a really new understanding of things like numerology. It really helped me think about that in a different way. It helped me learn how to read pip cards and Marseille style decks. And it was just a really enriching book at the point in my journey that I was, just in terms of giving me different new ways to think about the cards. So I really recommend that one as well. It's really good. So this video is getting kind of long, and I do want to kind of keep this Q&A to some bite-sized chunks. So I am going to sign off on it for now and go ahead and do another one with the remainder of the tarot and witchy questions. So I'll be posting that one here in a bit. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.